Well, it's great to see you today. I'm Lawana. I'm one of the faculty members here at Regis College. And so we're so glad to have you. So I'm going to let you just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do so that the folks that will be listening will know.
Okay. Is the screen okay? Like
Oh, yeah,
the
it's
background
fine. Yeah, you're
stuff?
fine.
I don't have a
Yeah,
thing to
you don't
blur
have
it.
like
So
a jumping dog or a jack in the box or anything back there. Yeah, it looks
there
good.
might be a cat soon. So
That's okay. Cats are fine. They're no problem.
so I'm Jill Jewill, and I'm a clinical nurse manager and a nurse out of Cincinnati, Ohio, at the Christ Hospital Health Network. I work on a 32-bed kind of progressive care, transitional care unit.
Okay, that's amazing. I did my master's at the University of Cincinnati, and I actually went up.
Okay.
Yeah, and I actually went up there for graduation and everything. It was really nice, and we had a great time there. So that's wonderful. So I only have one question that I have scripted in all of these, and it's the same for everyone. And then we just kind of talk about whatever. But the first question I always ask is purely selfish because I always want to know, how did people come to be a nurse? So how did Jill become Jill RN?
So I was a later in life nurse. I had kind of, we traveled a lot with my husband's job, and then I kind of I do jobs, but nothing really, like I'd work places. I did some accounting. I worked for some law firms, but nothing was really very fulfilling. And then I had my own thing that was a personal health issue that kind of made me just reevaluate my life. And when I did that, I was really kind of like, when I am no longer here, what kind of impact will I have made, and will people remember, will I have made any kind of difference? Mm. And then that's when I looked into nursing. I had a friend who was a nurse, and so she kind of convinced me, and I ended up going back to nursing school, and that's how it started. And I was really only going to always be a bedside nurse. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of ended up down a leadership path.
Oh, that's amazing. And we had that in common because I didn't get my RN until I was 36.
Okay.
So, yeah. It was later. Yeah. So I was with you in the classroom, managing the family and everything else, and trying to work and go to school, all those things. So but it's a good choice, and it's a choice you can make at any point. We have students that come in at all different ages, so it's great. So are you working, was your initial work in like a med surg floor? What was your first days of nursing?
No, it was actually, I started, so when I graduated, I went into a critical care internship, mm-hmm. and I was working on the floor that I'm actually managing now.
Oh, wow.
And was just a floor nurse there, and then became the assistant manager there. And then my path kind of forked a bunch of different ways. And then I ended up back on the unit.
Okay. So with the management role, was it kind of different going working beside your colleagues and then becoming the manager? What was that transition like?
As the assistant manager, it was, because I was, and at that point in time, nursing hadn't changed a whole lot, and the people, mm-hmm. on the unit. So when I came onto the unit, there was a high level of excellence. There are people who've been there a long time. You wanted to be like them because they were so smart. They had all the competencies, like you really wanted to emulate them. Mm-hmm. And then as the nurse practitioner role became much more popular, a lot of them ended up kind of graduating, going to nurse practitioner school. So, when I became the assistant, that was difficult because they had been all of my peers, and some of them had been there so long they were older than me, and I was now directing them. Mm-hmm. It wasn't awful. I mean, I think they were pretty good and respected me. I hadn't really formulated friendships where I did things with any of the nurses outside of there. Like we had a good working relationship, but I had my friends and my family life. So I think that helped. I know when there's people that are in that role now that they used to go out and to parties and things with some of the other nurses, they have a harder transition time. And suddenly they're having to direct them.
Yeah,
and then,
does.
So I was assistant manager, and then I became a manager on another floor. It was really an opportunity that presented itself. They were looking to do a throughput project, kind of keep people out of the emergency room, because we were saying we didn't have beds, but We did. We just didn't have like anybody managing a process.
Mm-hmm.
So they asked me if I would run a trial, and that was like the winter of 2019. And it was like an 8 to 10 bed overflow. And it taught me so much because I had to learn. I think being a manager is hard enough and you kind of learn something, but I had to learn everything from the beginning because a lot of it was starting a brand new process, where when you're on another unit, that process is already there. You're just modifying it or adapting it. And so I learned a lot from that. And then we were kind of turning into a kind of an observation unit. At first it was trial. They decided to make it permanent. So I applied for the manager position and I got it. And then we were really working on kind of being an observation unit, where we would have people that come to the ED that we really didn't want to send them home, but we wanted to figure out what was going on, but they didn't need to stay long term. And we were heading towards that, developed a chest pain unit for people who had acute chest pain that would come in, and we do a workup. We developed all the processes behind that. So we were really like moving, and then COVID came.
Oh yeah. So you new manager, new role, new unit, and now new virus. So this is like, and so what was that like in those beginning days? I mean, if you're like most of us, we probably all heard it and we were like, we knew something was coming, but we just thought it would be, another H1N1 here and then gone. What were the thoughts like in the beginning days for you, particularly with the manager's role?
It was, for me, I think I had an even heightened awareness or exposure to it, because since we were such a new unit, that I was starting to hire people and I had started to get that staff in. And then it was suddenly, as that came, and then we clamped everything down. So we stopped doing surgeries. And so for a while, the unit was closed. And so then I was finding myself managing my staff. I basically assigned them out to other units so they would have a home for a while. But then there was that unknown of, okay, what's going to happen with our unit, with the virus? We had a lot of unknowns. And then what ended up happening was we found ourselves, because of where we were located in the hospital, we could make the entire tower there a negative air pressure. So we found ourselves the COVID unit.
Go. That's it. Yeah, that's one of the criteria. You got some negative pressure rooms. Here you go, because we needed them. We needed a lot more than the 2 or 3 we had that were for TB patients,
right?
Which is what we typically had. So when you now are a COVID unit, what was the atmosphere like once we knew that this was going to be a bit of a monster for your staff, patients, so many things that changed during that time?
It was, I think we went through this transition, like we were so up and down. And for a while when we opened, they were like, you're going to be COVID. And it was those surges. And then we'd think that, okay, the numbers are going down. Maybe we'll go back to being the unit we were. So we'd start to maybe do half the unit COVID, half not. And then about June of that year, it settled into like, okay, we're COVID. And then I think the fear then was, how many surges are we going to have? And how long is this going to last? And I think people got fearful of like, where do we go with this? And then it was difficult for my staff, because when I hired them in, it wasn't, you're going to work in a COVID unit. It was, we're going to do this. And so it was kind of getting them to adapt that, and then really not being able to tell them, I don't know how long we're going to be COVID. Like, I don't know what it's going to look like when all this is done. So that was really hard. I think for a while, I know I felt, because I had to really kind of get myself into check a little bit, I got kind of depressed, and I felt like, I don't know where this is going. And I almost was like mourning, because I was mourning what we'd lost in our unit, what was happening in the country. Like, it was really difficult. But then at some point I was like, well, we have a choice. We can sit here and complain and feel sorry for ourselves, or we can do the best we can to take care of these patients. And my staff got on board, and I mean, they were just fabulous. We put in processes in place. Like, they had a lot of great ideas. Like, they standardized the care as much as they could for these patients. We had such a good process going. We even worked out things like, because we were developing, I didn't have a lot of leadership support. So at least on the unit, I had it in the organization. And so we ended up basically, I noticed that the families were really upset when the patients got admitted because they couldn't come see the patients. They really didn't get a chance to talk to them. And then the nurses were struggling because they're like, I haven't even been able to see the patient. The families are calling, they're really upset. So we kind of developed a process where we had it ended up being that I utilized our volunteer services, and they started making phone calls for me to the patient families. And they basically, I gave them a script, and they told them, nurses will call you at this time. We're really caring for your loved ones. You can go ahead and call before then, but they may not be able to update you. And it really helped ease some of their concerns and and they even gave the feedback to the person that was calling for me. So we just had to figure out how to use whatever resources we could. And the staff was so resilient because we went from such a fluctuating census. We'd have, 10 patients to, at one point in time, we were 2 floors. And then we ended up being 3 floors, and another manager came over and started managing because it was way more than what we could handle. And so with that, because we didn't have the staff, it was a lot of floated in staff. It was people who didn't know what they were necessarily how to care for the patients. The unit that we happened to be on was one of the newer ones in the hospital. So it had a lot of the more tech things. So that was a whole adjustment for staff coming over as well. So it was a lot of adapting, but the staff was great, and they owned we're going to take care of these patients the best we possibly can. And I really think that they did. I think it made a huge difference. And everybody's always told me it was difficult to start up a unit and, to create that, but they did such a good job. And I was so I felt privileged to be leading them and having them on my team. And I just think we made a huge difference in all of it.
Oh, that's amazing. I love how you were able to use the resources that you already had in the volunteers, because with family calling, we all know that when you're taking care of patients, the phone is the thing that slows you down. You cannot be answering that phone, every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But yet you have family who typically would be in the waiting area that can't even be in the hospital. So that was really good. And it just shows that as a manager, you were able to navigate that water between the patient and also their family, to make sure that they felt valued. So with your staff, we're going through COVID. We have these surges, ups and downs, new units and everything. And then we start hearing about vaccine coming. So what were kind of the conversations that you all had surrounding the vaccine and hopes about that and fears about that? Did any of that play into what was going on with your nurses as well?
It did. It was really, and really for them, I think my biggest concern was always, how were they doing? Because I was leading them, but they were the ones that were in the room every day with these patients, and they would see the really sick people. I had nurses I had one that had been a nurse for years that explained, one of the patient care situations, and it shook her so much because of what happened. So I was kind of surprised when the vaccine first came out. They weren't on board with it.
Wow.
But they were a younger group, and they really were there's too many unknowns. And so, and I really wasn't going to pry it was their decision, because we weren't mandating it. And I just kept giving them the information. And out of our time there, we had, I developed a really good relationship with the infectious disease doctors, and they were really great about, if you had a question, I could email him at 11 o'clock at night and he'd answer me right then. So I would take a lot of their concerns to him, and he would answer it and be like, this is really the evidence behind it. And so at first, when they were real unsure, by the time most of them ended up getting it then. And I think for us, I viewed it as hope. I was like, it's finally hope to end this because I don't know what else is going to.
Yeah, because there had been so many things they were trying, so many different treatments. We went from remdesivir to, so many different things, and nothing was working long term, and variants kept coming about. So I know we had some similar things here. I think at some point, some of the young folks, not just young nurses, but young folks in general, thought maybe I'd be okay, especially when initially there weren't as many in the younger ages that were getting sick. And then when Delta came through and the picture kind of changed, then that brought a little different nuance to it. So with your unit now, what is I know we're still in COVID. Let me just say, because we know that even though the numbers look better in some areas, there's still some areas that are struggling with, vaccination rates and with COVID as well. What about your unit now? Are you all still doing partial COVID or back to your normal unit? Or
so about springtime, when we kind of thought we had another lull, and they kind of thought, well, I think we're coming out of this. We've had the vaccine, we've had both doses, and they made the decision that they thought they would close the unit. And about that time, the position as the manager at the unit that I left from, the one I'm at now, became open. So I ended up going there, and a lot of my staff came with me. Almost all of them did. But then COVID still was there. And my organization was really adamant about, we're not going to put these patients on floors in the couple of TB rooms we have. Like ICU was different, but they really wanted to provide that separate, different level of care. So they kept it open. There has been someone else that's been managing it in the meantime. The best thing and I'm not over there anymore, but that I've seen, I'm still always curious and I pay attention to the numbers, and I have staff that'll get floated over there. But we've seen in the last month, like our numbers trickle down. So we're just hoping that at some point, we're not dealing with it like we were. Because I know the fear was with winter and that we'll have another surge again. Because last year, about this time is when it got really... Like we were having probably the biggest surge we'd had.
Yeah, so. It was pretty difficult. So with your nurses that have gone through all that you all went through with the COVID unit and the move, do you think their morale now is more hopeful? Do you think that kind of weight that they carried from that they found ways to deal or cope with that?
Yeah, I think they definitely are more hopeful. I sort of feel like nursing didn't get a break, though, because, we had all this that happened with COVID, and I hear it's all over the country. But then this summer, we're in the nursing shortage then, and I think everybody was reevaluating their life. And people started leaving the hospital and traveling to make more money and different things. And I kind of felt like they got caught in that with everything else of, okay, we just left and now that's, not settled again. But I think they still pay attention. I think it was a good experience for them because they learned a lot, and they definitely, some will still actually go over and help out on the COVID unit when they need help. They'll volunteer to be charged or to go over because they're like, I know it, I can help. But yeah, they do feel more hopeful.
Well, that's good. So how is the manager Jewill today different than that one that signed up for this job initially? What are the lessons that you took away from all of this that's happened?
It was just an incredible experience. Like, I don't even think when the spring came and they did the Florence Nightingale Award and I received it, I struggled because I'm like, this really is my team. Like my team did this. But I don't even think I had digested it then either. It took several months later to really kind of sit back and be like, what just happened to me this past year? But I think what it did for me, like I grew so much. And one of the things that was a huge positive was I was able to network with so many people in our organization that I still have those relationships with them because we needed the help over there. They were also over there, like our EVS staff, our respiratory, like that was great. And then I also gained a level of adaptability that I don't know that I ever would have had I stayed on the unit I'm at now. Because when I left and I saw that things can be done differently, and it may not always be as pretty or as neat of a package as what you like, but you can still do it and do it well. And I think a lot of that was with staffing. So I think it made me stronger and better. And even now the decisions, because the unit I'm on now is much bigger. I have almost 120 employees.
Oh, wow.
And we do a lot of procedural kind of high acuity things. And it helps me like make decisions. And so it gave me a lot to be that I think if I went right into the manager role over there, I wouldn't be as strong as what I am now. And I wouldn't have the knowledge.
So that was a preparation for a bigger space that you were going to step into. So that's wonderful. So I do want to ask you, as we on another track, I want to backtrack to where we talked about when you became a nurse. And the reason why is because being a nurse later in life is a whole different, set of circumstances. So is there any thoughts that you have about things that happened during that time for you as far as how to balance? I get that from students all the time because they have work, they have kids, they have the spouse, they have school, and it's all kind of this big hodgepodge of things. How were you able to, what were some things that you learned or were able to do to survive that?
I've always been fortunate. I've had really good support from my husband and my friends. My friends were really good too. So again, that in a different way was finding your resources and then kind of knowing your limitations too. I think it was hard with them being in school, but I had to learn that somebody else might need to pick them up or, get the other moms that could carpool and could help out. And then kind of the hardest part, I think, is not being so hard on yourself, that you're not going to be able to be at everything, that you are doing a lot. And I think it was really good for my kids because they said to me, almost to see me go through that later in life, it made them work harder and them realize that, you can accomplish things. And it gave them a different light that they may not have seen normally.
That's true. You're exactly right. My girls say the same thing. And I think you'll agree that when you look back, when you're going through it, it all seems wild and crazy. And when you look back, you can see some of the things you did good, but you look back and go, wow, how did I do that? Yeah, but that prepares you for the prioritization you're doing now, with what you're doing with nursing, knowing what's important and what are the things that you need to delegate and all of those things. So what makes you hopeful as we look towards the future of nursing? I know we've had people that have left the profession, a lot of things that have happened, but what is it that gives you hope as you continue in nursing? Because we both know that we're going to keep going.
I think there's a couple things. One is, for as bad as what it was and difficult as what it was for like this past year, I think a lot of nurses that have been in it for a while have struggled with, is this what I want to do? Kind of reevaluating. I was really worried about the profession in itself, that if all these nurses who've been here want to leave, what are we going to be? Right. But what I've seen from the nurses that are in nursing school is they're stronger too, because they've had to deal with this. They were the ones that had clinicals, but didn't really have clinicals.
Isn't that something? Wow.
And we're having to do online, and they've and some of them have been in it through this whole time. So I think where I at first didn't give them credit and was kind of like, because when I started interviewing, I started saying, there's a lot of negativity right now in nursing. How do you handle it? And I was surprised that a lot of them were really like, this is what I want to do. And so that gives me a lot of hope, and still seeing that even though people are leaving, there's really strong, dedicated people coming up. And then even in my own unit, some of the care practices, just seeing the processes that what nursing should be. It's evidence-based. We change, we adapt, we modify things, we make it better. Some of the patient populations that we're getting, medicine continues to evolve, and so does the care. So that still gives me hope too. So, and I've had to really kind of tell that to the staff that are staying, that are really, not comfortable and nervous about all the staff that are leaving. I'm like, there's still some great people coming. And I think we're still going to do great things in nursing. It's just going to look a little different.
Yeah. And it's okay if it looks different,
Yeah.
it's okay if it looks different, and different can be better. It can be
Right.
better. So that's amazing. Well, we definitely want you to give to the nursing family, because I call everybody my nursing family, because I'm like, you meet a nurse and, you just see somebody in scrubs and you're like, you're a nurse. And there are things that we just know because we're nurses, it's like, girl, we have that feel for things. So please express to them how very much we're appreciative of all that they're doing, that the nurses everywhere that I am certainly send love to them, because we know it's been difficult. I've been working in university clinic and teaching, so haven't been on the floor. But the first thing I thought about when all this happened was, the nurses, in the hospitals, and everything, and how everything was doing. So this was it's been good and therapeutic for me in a way to talk to nurses like yourself that have been there, so that we can see that things still look really good and that nursing's still the great profession that it was. And we have some really great nurse leaders. So we're really grateful for that. And thank you for persisting so we could get to talk to you.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we were able to. Yeah, it was important. So we're really grateful for that. And I do thank you for joining us.